the MCAT Cars podcast, session number 21. The Cars section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. Welcome to the MCAT Cars podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray. As always, I'm joined by Jack Westin from jackwestin.com, the premier MCAT Cars tutor online. If you want some more practice outside of these podcasts, go to jackwestin.com and click on the Cars Daily Passages. It's free passages that are emailed to you every day. Again, that's jackwestin.com. Click on the Cars Daily Passages to get those passages sent to your email every single day. This week, we have another great article for you. If you want to follow along, you can in this podcast app that you're listening to this. You can go to the description of the podcast and the link to this article is in there. Or if you're on the website, right there is the link and the article itself. Let's go ahead and jump in and say hello to Jack. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT Cars podcasts. I'm glad you're still here. I'm still here. Maybe those planes are flying in the sky, dropping sulfate into the stratosphere.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to last week's episode all about climate change. That was a good one. This week, we have hopefully another good one. What do we need to know about our article or passage this week?
Expect to see something like this on your test. Okay. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. You're like, I told you, be prepared.
This is like, I would use this as a Cars daily passage, or one of my practice exams. It's that good. It's that strong.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a good passage. I would not be surprised if something like this shows up on the exam.
Let me ask you, you say it's that good, it's that strong. If a student is out trying to find articles and stuff on their own, what is it about this passage? What do you see about this article that a student should go, oh yeah, this is a good article as well, like Jack would like?
If you want to see what I like, check out the daily passages, right? Because you'll see exactly what I think is going to be on the test. We try to mimic that to the best of our ability and every level. It's hard to say in like a couple sentences, but we look for everything from the discussion, the topic, right? Like whether it's something that the MCAT could use as a topic, which in this case it can be very much so. The nature of the arguments, what they discuss in the passage. And that is something that I think experience can help you acquire. Doing this for nearly a decade has taught me exactly the arguments and the styles, what they prefer, right? What they're looking for. They want to see if you can figure out the points of this passage while probably knowing nothing about this, right? I mean, the topics are about democracy, which we all know of, right? And but we haven't talked about democracy before using this angle. I mean, at least I don't think most students would have unless they were maybe in some kind of international affairs major, right? Or something along those lines. So it's relevant enough to present as a passage, but is obscure enough to the point where it's challenging. And that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into this one. Again, you can follow along. If you're listening on your podcast app, just look for the show description right in your podcast app, and there's a link to this article so you can follow along with us. First paragraph, everyone seems to agree that democracy is under attack. All right. Right off the bat, we're like, all right, here's the theme. Democracy is under attack. And the author is saying everyone apparently thinks that.
Right.
What is surprising is how many of its usual friends have come to fear democracy itself, or perhaps to fear that a country's people, too inflamed by narrow passions, risk turning politics into a distasteful blood sport, pitting the people versus democracy, in the startling words of one recent book title. Ooh, all right, so that second one's a long sentence to break down. So the author's saying potentially that people who like democracy are now scared of it and kind of giving a reason why, that people are scared and inflamed by their passions and turning into this blood sport.
That's it. So we're not seeing democracy in terms of its glories, in terms of its success. We're talking about it in terms of its failures, in terms of its problems. And knowing that can help you answer a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. So by reading this paragraph, you have set the scene for what we're going to probably discuss throughout the rest of this passage. So, there are strategies that say, hey, read the questions first. What's the point of reading the questions first if you don't know what you're looking for, right? And a lot of students think, or there are a lot of strategies out there that go, well, read the questions first because then you'll know what to look for. But it's very hard to keep track of what the questions we're even asking if you don't understand what's being discussed. So I think it's a very bad strategy to read the questions first and then answer questions. You may be able to do that and pull that off for the sciences, but I absolutely disagree with that when it comes to cars. I think for cars, you just have to do what you're normally supposed to do. Read the passage, answer the questions. I don't like gimmicks. I don't like reading the first paragraph and the last paragraph, or reading the first sentence and the last sentence of each paragraph. Just read, right? Just read and try your best to understand. And if you do that, you're going to have a great time with the questions, or at least a better time than you would if you were to just read the questions first.
Okay.
So going back to this paragraph, just, really note democracy is hurting in some way. There's some issues causing some kind of violence. We don't really know exactly what, but that's all we really know at this point.
Okay. Next paragraph. Observers have understandable qualms about political programs that are alarmingly illiberal, yet obviously democratic, in that most citizens support them. Observers of what? I don't know. Understandable qualms. So they have issues about political programs that are alarmingly illiberal. So not liberal, I'd assume, but are democratic. And most citizens support them. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on here, but it seems like there's something illiberal and people are supporting it, democratically speaking.
Yeah.
And the author says what democracy is. Democratic in that most citizens support them. Democratic, as we all probably already know, is about the opinions of people, right? The majority of people. That's what democracy is all about. So the author is defining democracy for us. It's the support of the people. And it seems like democracy is going against liberal ideas. It's illiberal, right? It's going against liberal ideas. I don't know how that plays in, but that's something the author is bringing up. So maybe we have to pay attention to that.
In Poland and Hungary, democratically elected ruling parties attack Muslim migrants for undermining Christian identity. So here the author's giving an example of something that is democratic, because we have ruling parties that were elected democratically, and they are illiberally attacking Muslim migrants for undermining Christian identity.
Exactly.
All right.
They have educated you on this at this point. They have given you an example of this. Great.
In the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte rules with an iron fist, pledging to put down drug pushers in funeral parlors, not prisons. So again, another example, somebody who is elected president in the Philippines is violently, what they talked to earlier about blood sport, violently dealing with things potentially that is not very fun.
Yeah, and you now know what illiberal means, right? Violent, maybe attacking in some ways. So we can probably think of liberals as more passive in this regard, right? I mean, that's at least how the author paints liberal. There might be a different definition of liberal depending on who you are, but that's the author's interpretation of what illiberal means, attacking.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, next paragraph. Modern democracies all rest on the claim of popular sovereignty, the proposition that all legitimate governments grow out of the power of a people and in some way are subject to its will. Modern democracies, popular sovereignty, meaning I think sovereignty, I would have to remember, is like kind of standing alone. Interesting. The proposition that legitimate governments grow out of the power of the people and are in some ways subject to its will. So just modern democracies are these governments that are voted in, elected in the power of the people.
Right.
And in some way, the second part of that, and in some way are subject to its will. I'm confused why he's or she's bringing that up.
Well, remember, democracy is a government run by the majority of the people, right? What the majority of the people dictate. So whatever they dictate goes, and that's their will, right? They're subject to its will. So you're subject to whatever people believe or agree with.
Unless you have an electoral college like the U.S.
Right. Well, that's
and then it's not the majority. But anyway. All right, next sentence here. Yet when a large majority of a country's people vehemently supports policies a critic finds abhorrent, many liberals, even avowed Democrats, recoil in horror. So, I don't know. So oh man, this is confusing. So they're saying when the large majority, right, when a democratic part of people, the large majority, supports things that other people find abhorrent, liberals, even Democrats, those who are okay with voting in based on the majority, don't like that.
Yeah, it's a paradox. It's a dilemma, right? Democrats, liberals, they like freedom of speech. They like, freedom of voting and doing what you want. But what if that voting revolves around illiberal ideas? Right. So the first sentence of this paragraph is defining what democracy is. It's the will of the people, right? It's what people decide. But what if the will of the people is going against liberal ideas, right? When I visualize this, I'm thinking of like people who are doing things that are not necessarily going with what liberals like. So violence, for instance. So this goes back to the ideas that we talked about in the first paragraph and in the second paragraph too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, this is the hard part about this passage. You have to know that there's a distinction between democracy and liberalism, right? Liberal ideology and democracy are separate entities. And the author is making that very clear, that sometimes there is this dilemma, there's this problem, right, between liberalism and just democracy in general. And usually what we like to do is we think of liberals as democratic, as, democracy. But sometimes there's this issue, right? This issue where democracy could go against liberal ideas.
Yeah. Thus arises the possibility of a painful paradox that, quote, democracies end when they are too democratic. Whoa. That's like a mind-blown thing. Democracies end when they are too democratic. Okay, I'd have to keep reading to hopefully see what the author means by that.
Well, we already know, right? If it's too democratic, it becomes violent, right? And why is it violent? Because it's not liberal anymore. It's illiberal. So maybe if it's too democratic, it becomes illiberal, which means that it ends for some degree. That's what the author is trying to say, at least. It's a lot going on, very hard to understand. But as long as you know that we're discussing democracy and how it can lead to some kind of violence that's illiberal, you're good. You're fine. You're going to be okay. Go ahead.
So concluded a 2016 piece by the U.S. political observer Andrew Sullivan, resurrecting an argument made 2 generations earlier by Samuel Huntington in a 1975 report called The Crisis of Democracy, issued in the wake of the international student revolts of the 1960s. So the second part of that is just kind of the author saying, look, somebody else thinks this too, I think.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, paragraph 5. Even the left-wing scholar Chantal Mouffe, however you say that, who has long championed raw populist conflict as the essence of radical democracy, seems distraught at current events. So left-wing, meaning, I guess, really democratic, loves democracy, is still distraught, not happy with what's going on right now.
Yeah, left-wing could mean liberal for all we know, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quote, democracy that is in good working order with conflict, but where people accept the existence of their adversaries is not easy to reestablish, end quote. She recently told an interviewer, gesturing implicitly toward tolerance, one of the most jeopardized liberal norms in the current context. Quote, I'm not that optimistic. So it looks like this woman here, Chantal, is saying, look, one of the norms that we're missing is tolerance. And that's part of the issue with what we have.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because the author, or Chantal in this case, is saying that democracy that accepts both positions is hard to reestablish, meaning that maybe we lose this to some degree when we're too democratic. Mm-hmm. And Chantal is obviously trying to say that that's a good thing. It's good to have, this debate. But when we lose it, that's bad. It's hard to reestablish. So that's probably the issue that Chantal is having. And that is really the idea of tolerance, tolerating other people's points of views, right? And that may be something that is jeopardized, something that we lose because of this too democratic nature of what's going on. That's kind of what is going on in this paragraph. And we can figure that out because later in that paragraph, it's saying that she is gesturing implicitly toward tolerance. So the author has decided that the word tolerance means acceptance of points of views, and that acceptance is being taken advantage of when we're too democratic. And it even says it's one of the most jeopardized liberal norms. So it defines it as a liberal idea. Tolerance is a liberal idea. Not being violent is a liberal idea, right? So those are the things that are being jeopardized or being weakened as a result of a democracy.
Okay. Last paragraph here. Current affairs may seem especially bleak, but fears about democracy are nothing new. So the author is pointing out, kind of similar to last week's or 2 weeks ago, that look, we have this thing that everybody's scared of, but it's not new. It's been around.
Okay.
At the zenith of direct democracy in ancient Athens, in the 5th century BC, one critic called it a patent absurdity. And so it seems to most political experts, from Aristotle to Edmund Burke, who considered democracy, quote, the most shameless thing in the world. All right, so we have some names here, Aristotle and Edmund Burke, and calling democracy the most shameful thing in the world. That's awesome. Shameless thing in the world. So just some examples of how we've had fears and critics of democracy for a while.
Right.
As the American founding father, John Adams, warned, there never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. Well, that's a good way to end. Nice bleak thing. So John Adams is saying, look, democracy, every democracy that has come has failed at some point.
Well, so why would the author say this? What's the point of saying this?
That, I don't know. He's warning us.
Well, John Adams is warning us.
John Adams warned us. Yeah.
But what was the point of bringing in John Adams?
Well, John Adams, so it says the American founding father. So even the person who founded America was concerned about democracy, yet we still created it. So there's always been concerns. Exactly.
There's always been concerns, even back to the initial stages of democracy, right, in America. So the author is trying to imply that, look, we're always going to be worried about democracy. And this is where the author is really painting the picture that maybe it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, maybe democracy is challenging liberal norms, maybe it's going too violent or not being, tolerant enough. But that doesn't mean necessarily that democracy will end. That's too extreme. At least that's what the author is saying, especially when the author directly says that it's kind of absurd.
Yeah.
A patent absurdity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of absurd to suggest this.
All right. So big takeaway from this is that democracy is under attack, and democracy kind of has always been under attack.
Yeah, that's it. Democracy is under attack in terms of liberal norms, right? It's going against liberal ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to end democracy, right? It's always been under attack. Exactly.
All right. There you have it. Again, Jack Westin from jackwestin.com. If you want some more help, some more prep outside of these podcasts, which come out every week, you can get a CARS passage sent directly to your inbox every single day. Go to jackwestin.com and click on the CARS Daily Passages. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT CARS Podcast.